Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ira, and then I think Ira's going to let each one of the individual panelists introduce themselves, since I don't know everybody's backgrounds in detail. So I've known Ira for a long time. I actually don't want to admit how long I've known him. In various jobs, Sony, Marvel, then Disney, after Marvel got acquired from Disney, and most recently at Fox, where he was EVP of digital marketing. In Fox Film Group, and in most of his capacity over the last 15 years, he's been working in and around sort of digital media, and so it's one of the reasons why I thought he'd be the perfect person to lead this panel. So I'm going to start up, turn it over to Ira Rubenstein.
Thanks, Paul. So really tonight is really going to be about some basic, I call it marketing 101, kind of some do's and don'ts of marketing. And just so the panelists here can get an idea, I'd like to, people raise your hand if you're a CEO of like a startup right now. Okay, get your sense. And how many of you have actually spent some money in some capacity in marketing, whether it's a PR agency or buying media or something like that? So we got a couple. How many feel they got their money's worth? Okay, good. That gives you a good sense of why everyone's here. So I thought to get started, I'd have our panelists introduce themselves and basically, give you top level. Sherry Crane has a strong media background. Don has a strong PR background, and Ann has a strong social background. And what's really interesting these days, just in terms of social media, is it's one of those new things that you can't pigeonhole because it really touches across paid, PR, product, and everything. And we could have a whole separate discussion about social, but I just wanted to make sure we included that in the discussions as we talk about these core areas. So first, I'll turn it off to Sherry, and she can introduce herself and her background.
Okay, Ira and I crossed paths back at Sony, and I was running the media for Sony Motion Pictures for a number of years. Then started my own consulting company when I had kids so I could spend more time with them. Then went back to work with CBS Films and now have my own company again. And I do marketing and media planning and placement for about 50% entertainment, 50% other kinds of businesses.
I'm Don Levy, and I've known Ira since my earliest days at Sony Pictures. I wear a few hats. I teach an entertainment marketing course for Boston University's LA program. I consult to the Entertainment Technology Center down at USC. I'm starting up a company of my own focused on entertainment. So I'm wearing the entrepreneur hat for a little bit. And serving on some advisory boards for some startups. So I'm kind of firsthand experiencing a lot of this. But I spent most of my career in either public relations or marketing. Starting out with film, but film, television, new media, and certainly during the years Ira and I, and also Ann and I were working together. Sony Pictures Digital Entertainment was involved in a number of real kind of entrepreneurial businesses, startups kind of within a big company, where we had to employ many of the tactics that companies need to use now. So got to experience a lot of that. And I guess the only other thing I'd say about PR is that most of the journalists who I used to work with no longer have jobs. So that landscape has changed, and we'll talk about more of that later.
I'm Ann. I currently still work at Sony Pictures to sort of continue the Sony Pictures trend. I've been doing social media forever, so while social media is a new term, it's not really. It's community management. It's been around forever. And I do film, home entertainment, and television properties, but I'm also the weird social media person where if you have an API, I will be the one digging into your API to figure out how to tweak it so that we can use it for our brands. So I'm always digging into the Instagrams or whatever new startup comes along to figure out how we can use it somehow.
Excellent. Okay, so since I have a whole bunch of questions here, and I figured we'd hold some time for Q&A at the end, but of course, being interactive, you can feel free to, ask questions, and we'll just moderate the discussion. Since South by Southwest just wrapped, and I know there were some articles about the pros and cons of startups, and there's been a lot of hype about startups that make it at South by Southwest and don't make it. I thought it might be interesting for both Ann and Don to talk about strategies about going to events like South by Southwest for startups, and does it really make sense or not?
Well, I think it always makes sense to go, but it also makes sense to know why you're going and understand what your objective is. And if part of the objective, if you go into something as big as a South by Southwest, saying, I will only be successful if I've captured, the mind share of the conference, well, that may not be a realistic objective for a lot of companies. There probably were a few that you saw that, kind of caught people's attention, but chances are they were because of deals made with really established big companies. So for anybody just trying to get attention at a South by Southwest, I don't think it can always be measured in sort of number of tweets or, sort of purely statistical things. However, I do think that a conference, especially a South by Southwest, and there are others, they're more valuable for the conversations that you can have. It is a gathering of people, and oftentimes they're influencers. They're people who will help tell your story later on. I think that publicity per se has become increasingly social, and one of the ways to socialize your ideas is in a social setting, and certainly a South by Southwest is that.
Yeah, I literally just got off the plane from South by Southwest last night, so I apologize for being super kind of tired. South by Southwest to me isn't about like the big launch of your startup. It's the random people you're going to meet in the hallway or sharing a pedicab with, or I met some awesome people on a cab ride to the airport. I shared a cab ride to the airport with some people, and they told me about their product. They weren't pitching me. They were just like, this is what we're doing. And it's because people at South by Southwest can read through you pitching your product. They don't want you to like, I want money from you for my whatever. They just want to know what it is and how it can be useful to them or to their friends, or use in your general life. And I think that's more what it is. You don't need to have a giant presence. You don't have to have a party at South by Southwest. You don't have to do a press release about your product there. It's just go to every party you can, talk to people, meet people in the hallways, and just be there and experience what else is going on. Because even if you think you and you probably do have some great idea, talk to somebody else, because they may have some other idea that you can learn from and steal from and make your product even better. And that, to me, that's what South by Southwest is about. It's really about the meeting people. It's not, and going to parties. It's not so much, the panels that you go to where you're just sitting there listening to somebody else. It's the conversations you're gonna have.
Okay, so because it just happened, we got people here. What's another event that would be good for this type of audience? Is there anything else that's like that?
I mean, it depends upon what your product is. I mean, there's the E3s that you're going to be meeting people at
For gamers?
For gamers, and it was interesting too. This year at South by Southwest, there was a whole gaming contingent, which I'd never seen before over all the years that I've gone to. So there's smaller little events. I mean, Digital LA here, puts on some really good events, some meetups that people in LA should go to, because you never know who you're going to meet at something like that.
But in terms of reaching out to the general population, or called the digital press, is there, and this kind of ties in with conferences and why you go and maybe speak on a panel, is there any real conferences you want to aim for, Don, or that you want to speak on a panel to actually get some attention, or is those days gone?
No, I actually think that there are still several opportunities out there. The thing is, though, is there's a bit of a glut of conferences. So, and there are also a lot of conferences that have a lot of tracks, so it becomes like a three-ring circus. I think step one, though, is it's an evaluation process. Question one is, who's the audience at the conference and what's my product? Because I think that the good news is that there are a lot of conferences. And what that means is that some of the better ones may be smaller, but more focused on a given sector.
Can you name any examples for ones that you think are better?
Let's see. I certainly, sort of South by Southwest is kind of out there right now. I mean, in terms of like the big ones.
And there's Blog World, which I think
yeah.
has been renamed now, and I mean, there's Blog Her. There's smaller little things, and Digital LA is putting on the Silicon Beach Fest. That if you can get on a panel there, that would be great, because tons of startups and tons of press in LA at least go to that event.
I mean, I'm friends with Paul, who does, App Nation. I'm sure there's a bunch of apps here. Does that have any traction, you think?
I think so.
Or ad tech, or for
there-
those who are trying to do advertising?
Yeah, there's ad tech. I know Wired was doing, a conference that they've been moving around the country. Last year, I think it was in New York. Forbes, Fortune, they all kind of have conferences. I do think, though, that part of it is really about, who are you trying to reach, and trying to find, the sort of like-minded. For instance, and I forget the name of it, but there's an agency up in San Francisco that's really planted the flag with branded content. And they just gathered, they had a 2-day conference in New York. Part of it was sort of shameless self-promotion for the agency. But at the same time, it was also an opportunity to kind of socialize the idea of branded content, because it's getting harder to reach an audience, and that's certainly another avenue of doing that.
Okay, well,
I will look it up before. I
Okay.
don't want to. I turned my iPhone off, but I will look it up before.
Was it Federated Media?
That's what I was thinking it was.
It well might be.
well, I think we'll come back to messaging and having a media message. I want to jump over to media. And we have people who actually spent dollars on media. And I don't know if they used agencies or did it themselves, but why don't you talk about what are some of the things someone like you or an agency helps with that someone can just do themselves? Because these days people can just go on Facebook and buy ads themselves.
Yeah, there is a tendency, and there's always been a tendency, not just with digital, but with all kinds of media, where people think that they're going to save the fee that they pay to a specialist. The fact of the matter is that media is a supply and demand situation, so the costs are constantly changing. The lead time that you're working with, the seasonality that you're working with, can make a huge difference in your cost. So just by waiting 2 weeks before you go in and start your negotiation, you can save a lot of money. That's what a media person will know. And media agencies typically save on a routine basis about 40% over what you might do going by yourself. One of the things you have to remember is when you're working with a salesperson, they're getting paid a commission that's a percentage of what they sell to you. So the more they can get you to pay for it, the more money they're going to make. And it's basically up to the media person to know what the market value is of that particular process. The other thing is where you go. I can't tell you how many clients they'll look at something and say, this makes sense because it's cheap. Well, it's cheap, but it's not reaching the right people. It's very common to have something that's a little bit more expensive, but when you break down what is the audience composition, what is the reach of the kinds of people, what is the environmental synergy What is the behavioral composition? You take that matrix of all those things and put it together, and something that's a little bit more expensive could actually be a much more cost-effective buy for you. And that's what, again, what a media person can help you do. The other part of media is it's always a balance of how many people you want to reach versus how often and how much repetition you have to have in order to get them to understand what your message is and to generate whatever the action is that you're trying to get. And there are different vehicles that accomplish that in different ways. And there's also duplication between the vehicles. And that's how a media person knows how to mesh those all together to get the best balance of the reach and the frequency to accomplish whatever your marketing goals are.
Okay. Everyone, I just want to make sure people understand the basics of media, this reach and frequency, because that's really important. And I asked Sherry actually a little beforehand, how do you know how much money is enough? Where if you're spending too little, that it's just like, you're just blowing it away in the wind, and you're spending too much and you're pounding. How do you find, what is the basic minimum, to actually?
Well, I wish I could tell you that there is a dollar figure. That's not the way it works. It really comes back to what is your marketing objective. And that's where you start with how complex is your message, how unique is your product, how interesting is it? I mean, if I tell you that I'm going to throw money off the roof in half an hour, I only have to say it one time, and you're going to be out on the street collecting it. If I'm selling a new brand of laundry detergent, I'm going to have to beat you over the head with it until you start to remember it. So there are different things. The competitive presence, the time of year that you are, all of those things play a factor. So the first thing you start with is how much frequency or repetition do you need to get your message across? And you can think about, there's basically a checklist of the complexity, of the competitive presence, of the uniqueness, those various things, and say, okay, this is easy or it's difficult. That's where you start with. And then you focus. So you can focus any number of ways, but you could start really small and be on one news site that's very, very targeted, and even be on that site just for a couple of weeks, just at a certain time of day, and so that you're focusing against a very small audience. But as soon as you start to see that traction, whether that's working and you're getting some response from that audience, then you can start to expand. Once you've kind of laid that out, you can look at what it costs to get to the overall objectives, sales goals that you might have, or overall reach goals, and what kind of response rate and conversion you need to get from your media in order for it to play out. And if you look at something and say, okay, I need a 15% response rate, that's not going to happen. So you have to track it back and make sure that you've got reasonable goals. But start small, start targeted, and then as you start getting some traction, even just on the teeny tiniest little thing, you can start to expand it beyond that.
And that works for either, I know there's some businesses here that are B2B, and I know there's some businesses here that are B2C. So both publicity-wise, socially, and media, there's different places you can go for either one, based on your audience.
I'm talking about online and digital and mobile right now, but the same holds true if you're trying to do television or radio. Start with, instead of being on 3 different radio stations, start with one radio station, just one day part, and be in there with enough frequency to get traction against that audience versus being spread too thin that you're just throwing your money away.
Okay, excellent.
How are you measuring traction, like click-through,
Well-
response,
Well,
awareness?
it depends. What are you trying to generate? Are you trying to generate awareness? Are you trying to get people to download an app? Are you trying to get people to buy something? What is, and that's what I say, it comes back to what is your sales objective, and then you have to see whether it's going to pay out or not. And sometimes in the beginning, it is, you have to come to terms with what's an acceptable rate of loss, because it's not a straight direct response kind of campaign that you might have for an established product. If it's something new, you're also doing branding, and it's, in that case, it might just be awareness that you're trying to generate, versus actual downloads or something that's really quantitative and specific in that regard.
For film
So there's-
projects, for example.
Pardon me?
For film projects and movies and TV.
I mean, film projects is one of the other clients that I'm working on right now is a division of Brandman University. And it's targeted to English-speaking Hispanics. Yeah, 18 to 34.
Very targeted.
Yeah, they're not mainstream enough to go to or comfortable enough with their language skills to go to regular college, but they're fluent enough in English that they can understand classes that are taught in English by Hispanic professors that are there to help them out. So it's an audience that's this big. And it's also, the concept is becoming a little bit more familiar, but it's still one of those things where you do most of your classes online and you go to classes once a week. All in all, it's a complex concept. There are a lot of online colleges, so there's a lot of competition. It's a very narrow target.
Can you talk, just to give them a real example, what's part of their media mix right now that you're comfortable sharing?
They've been doing radio and digital. And just to give you a frame of reference, they started last year, they opened 3 campuses in Inland Empire, which is like Ontario, Victorville, Palm Desert area. And they spent about $10,000–$15,000 a month on supporting those campuses with local radio. Now they've just opened a campus in Irvine, which is part of Los Angeles, much more expensive market, and they're spending about $30,000 a month to support the introduction of that. Now they're looking at how many people are they signing up for their for their each class. It's not paying for everything, but they also realize that they're laying the groundwork for a future. So they got to get some response, but they're not looking for it to pay out in its entirety. Yeah.
So that's an example of like a high customer response. So it requires them to sign up for a class and actually attend the class, ideally and pay for the class.
Uh-huh.
So would you recommend different forms of advertising for a low customer response versus high customer response? So like low response being like a hit on your website versus a high response being like leaving a rating for like a restaurant or a provider of some sort?
Yeah, something that, again, it's, that goes to, how difficult the task is. In this case, what we're talking about, it's actually, there's all this funding for this group. So for the most part, when you can reach these people, they don't have to pay for their classes because the government pays for their education there are subsidies for this. So that's part of the selling point too. But it is still, to get somebody to commit to that, even in terms of time, it's a big commitment. If you're downloading a free app or a free game or something, you don't need as much money, you don't need as much frequency. What you do need is to be unique and to stand out.
And that goes to your product and the conversion within your product of once you have that person. And again, that really goes to just like what Sherry was saying before. Don't launch big, do small, work on your conversion, and then once you've optimized your app and your conversion, then you lay in the money. Because there's been numerous examples, and I'm not going to name names because we're being recorded, where startups or game companies especially have put a lot of money in the launch of a game, got a lot of people to try it, but didn't convert anybody, and they already spent their marketing money. So rather, if you just do a little toe in the water, you work on your conversion internally you have 2 conversions, one to get them to try it, and then once they've tried it, to convert them to the upsell. And so optimizing that. I'm gonna jump right into now this whole phrase of earned media versus paid media, which is kind of like the buzzword, I'm sure you probably have heard a few times. And I'm gonna throw this to Ann. So how do you socially then, take advantage of some of these paid medias? I mean, you've done it a lot with the film and TV guys, and they do, again, it's sexy, it's a film or it's a TV show, it's maybe a little bit easier, but, what are some of the tricks in, taking advantage of when you have your paid, how you amplify that with your social?
Yeah, one of the good examples we had 21 Jump Street, which came out last year, right around this time. And we worked with paid media on it to amplify the reach of it, and we did it was basically a tweet off between Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill, and it was who was going to release the trailer. So you tweeted to either, you followed Jonah Hill or you followed Channing Tatum, and whichever one got the most amount of followers at a certain amount of time was the one that released the trailer. And so we used paid media to get the word out that this was actually happening, because they could do it on their own, but they didn't really have that many followers at the time. And surprisingly, Jonah Hill was the one that released the trailer. I personally thought Channing Tatum should have released it shirtless, but whatever. That was interesting too. During the vow, we bought ads on Facebook for the vow so that we could be the first Facebook page to reach 1 million users or 1 million followers, because apparently that matters to marketing people. I don't really agree that the number of people on your page is that important. To me, it's about the engagement, not the number of followers you have.
Does that work also for Twitter? It's more about the engagement?
It is.
than
To me,
than
it's really
followers?
like 1 million followers means nothing to me if nobody's engaging, nobody's talking about my content, nobody's retweeting it or sharing it. Doesn't matter, because we potentially have bought those people and they could care less about my product. It doesn't help me. So I would rather have 100 people than have 1 million people on my page, because they're my brand advocates. They're the ones that are going to go out there and shout to the rooftops about my product. They're the ones that are really going to I worked on Spider-Man, and I used to when I ran the Spider-Man communities, I would give out Spider-Man sweatshirts to the top people that were on there, you made the best post on our message boards, let me send you a Spider-Man sweatshirt. And you'd be amazed, you send one person some free thing and they've got 10 of their friends all of a sudden all over your message boards, or they're taking photos of your product, and they're it's amazing by some little thing that costs you nothing, like a sticker or something. Look at GetGlue. GetGlue will send you out these little, for free, we'll send you the stickers when you check in. You can actually mail off for these stickers, and you'll see them everywhere. People have folders full of these stickers, and it doesn't cost them anything, but it's got people coming back to their product. Well, but it doesn't. It doesn't cost. It probably costs them maybe a couple of cents to print a sticker, and $1 to mail it out or something.
Just to follow up on, Twitter, obviously, one of the most important. You have a bunch of CEOs here. They have products. They're a product. They're a brand. Should the CEO be the Twitter, or should the brand be the Twitter, or should it be maybe someone within the company that's the brand?
It should be somebody within the brand. I've seen, I won't name names.
Name some
again,
examples of good ones
but
and bad ones.
There's a prominent design firm company where the guy, he runs the brand. He's the CEO, creator of the product, and he went on a trip to Indonesia, and instead of posting to a personal account, he's posting to his brand account photos of naked men. So all of a sudden, all these people that are following his company are seeing these random drunk or naked photos, and it's not him, it's the brand, and you're hurting the brand. So to me, it needs to be somebody within the company, not the CEO, because you don't even know if some CEO is going to have a blog and go off on some random rant about, some political thing that's going to hurt your company. If it's somebody within the brand running it, they can get sign off on stuff. They can run it through marketing people. They can make sure that they're on point with whatever you need to get your word across. And then you kind of have a filter on it. So it's not just one person running rogue all of a sudden.
But isn't it important that this stuff happen in real time?
It does, and you're not
you
getting.
can't
You're
really
not getting,
have an approval process.
But you're not getting sign off on every single tweet you're running or every little thing. But that person
You need
has-
someone with judgment.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
I-
I have a constant filter in my head. Like, I can't, even on my personal account, I can't say this, I can't say that, I can't say this. And you kind of, I joke with the lawyers that I should have been a lawyer because I run all this stuff like by the invisible lawyer in my head. So you kind of have somebody that kind of has some kind of like bias, not, some kind of like another level back from the CEO or top management from running it that can kind of say, yeah, we shouldn't really say that.
That way, and because you're all about messaging
Well, yeah,
and crisis management.
yeah. Well, number one, I think too often on the question of should the CEO be the one to tweet or not, I think it's a fact of life that almost everybody who is doing business today probably has a Twitter account and has a point of view or personality, and that is fine. And I think CEOs, are certainly entitled and probably should articulate things that are of interest to them. Articles they're seeing, something that is exciting them. 'Cause
Yeah, like the
they're-
Southwest Airlines guy
yeah.
does a really good
And they're
job.
genuinely interesting people. It's part of how you become a CEO is you have a point of view, you have something, you have a vision, and other people care about it. So I think that is valuable. But there is a difference between the CEO talking about what is of interest to them or what matters to them and being the brand. And there, as long as there's at least a distinction between the two, it's a good place to start. As far as the whole aspect of social, I think when Ann was starting, when a lot of companies were just starting to flirt with social, the people doing social media were Ann was like a rare professional, because usually, I got, like somebody's cousin or, somebody's kid was the social media expert, which is fine, but I think it's become increasingly sophisticated, and it's also kind of a clock never stops. We talk about approvals, you got to move really, really quickly. I can think of two cases in very recent memory where you saw a great example of on-the-spot stuff, the Oreo cookie commercial on the Super Bowl.
Yeah, real-time marketing.
I mean, that blew me away.
I don't know if
because-
they all know about it, so I want to quickly.
How many on the Super Bowl the lights went out, right? And the Oreo brand was already sponsoring. They actually had a little contest going. So when you talk about earned and paid media, there was already a good integrated campaign going on
Yeah.
where people were voting for one kind or another. So it turned out that they actually had the brand manager at the agency because they were kind of conducting things, in
They had
real
a control
time.
room happening, so everybody was in the same room getting sign off right away on what was going on. But on the same time, you've got like something like, The Onion during the Oscars where they were doing it's basically called real-time marketing. Now they've kind of coined the term where, they were doing articles and tweeting during the Oscars, and The Onion really screwed themselves because they were talking about, I think it was like, raping the little girl that was up there or something, and it was, they really got a lot of negative press. So you kind of have to watch what happens. Oreo did a good example, but you have to not push it so far, past the envelope. You kind of have to. I mean, there's a guy that has a really good book about social media, and he coined the term light, bright, and polite. And that's you kind of have to keep it, on the happy end to make sure that
Do you know the name of the book?
I can't remember. The book is called Light, Bright, and Polite. I can't remember the name of the guy that wrote the book, but it's a really fascinating book. And I mean, that's a really good term to keep in mind when you're doing social media, light, bright, and polite, because then you're not pissing people off and getting them really upset about your brand.
And that was where the Oreo cookie thing came, because they were able to actually design an image that was just beautiful. It was, sort of a very dimly lit Oreo cookie with the tagline, you can still dunk in the dark.
Yeah.
And it was on brand message. They posted that, they tweeted it, it was on Facebook. And because it was so fast, right? I mean, if they did it 6 hours later, it would have been meaningless. It would have been just like a nice graphic that somebody would have had in their portfolio.
It was perfect timing because everybody else was just sitting around going, "What do I say?"
What do we do?
The
What do we-
Super Bowl's
nobody-
not
yeah.
on, and it's dark, and now I'm watching a bunch of commercials.
And they were
This is
really
awesome.
on it. But yet, you know, an example of the other side of it, which is that you can't respond fast enough,
Yeah.
is, turning to politics, State of the Union night. Marco Rubio had that very awkward, dry mouth. And forgetting what anybody's politics are, he reached for a bottle of water, and there was a nice little shot of Poland Spring water. But the Poland Spring brand actually got a lot of criticism for not jumping on it until the next morning.
Yeah.
And it was
But
like,
he did a fun
where's
thing where
the
he just
social
took a
thing?
shot of the Poland water thing and posted it to his account.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, he was kind of all over it, and they were, it was
Yeah.
kind of an opportunity to actually have some fun with it. And, if you miss it. So, I would say in the social area, definitely keeping clear on the message, but also making sure that somebody's actually paying attention to it. It's kind of, to me, everybody always, companies, at Imagery, God knows we, went through designing sites, everybody would say, oh, let's do this, let's do that. And I'd always look at them and say, and who's going to actually do it? Right? You actually, if you're going to tweet, you actually have to have something to tweet. If you're going to be posting stories, with a studio interactive group, you guys map out, at least a campaign.
We know what
weeks
media is
and
being
months
bought,
in
and we
advance.
kind of plan
Yeah.
stuff out ahead of time.
There's
but,
a calendar, you're looking at events, you're
Yeah.
planning it out, and
Yeah.
in Sony's case, it was the internal team, at Fox's case, we used outside agencies. When I was at Marvel, I was very fortunate, there were some inside people who lived it 24/7.
Yeah, I mean, you had an
And-
awesome team at Marvel. I envied your team at Marvel. But like that's I don't sleep half the time because I'm not it's not a 9 to 5 job. It's it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, we're working through weekends on stuff. We had Evil Dead on Friday night at South by Southwest, and we had people retweeting and posting stuff all through the weekend of all the buzz that was happening about the movie. So it's just, you just need someone that doesn't want to sleep very much, I guess.
I think, one of the things that becomes really interesting, and you touched on it before, everybody's talking about it a little bit, is that engagement with the audience. Because we can have all of the great kind of marketing tactics and everything else, but when it really comes down to it, it's kind of the users, it's your customers, it's that word of mouth. And as long as your messaging is authentic, right? It's got to be authentic, and it's got to give people something to talk about, which is also good. But you're also engaging with
Yeah,
them.
I mean,
So-
ask them a question. Don't just say, watch the trailer. Ask them something about the trailer. Did you see this piece in the trailer, or did you see this piece of the product, or did you know this did this, or how do you use this?
So for these people who aren't marketing movies right here, but
Yeah.
asking more questions about their product,
Yeah.
or questions related to their product, whether it's
Or
whatever it
retweeting
is.
somebody that's like, has a question about your product, like if your product does something and somebody has a question, chances are there's, 50 other people that probably have that same question, that they're just, they just don't know how to phrase or don't know how to get a hold of you to ask that question. So, retweet that person and ask and reply to them and talk to people.
And again, there are agencies that can do this, or you can find someone in your group that can do it.
I'm sure
gonna
there's somebody
ask-
within your company that or somebody, within your friends or you or somebody that does this that is close to the product. I'm all for hiring, outside companies, but, look inside first. I mean, I created my job at Sony Pictures. I was a web developer and then I was a web producer, and social media became my full-time job because it's what I'm passionate about. And I'm sure, there are people around you that are passionate about doing this that, would love to do it for you.
Okay, I'm gonna ask one more question, and then we'll open up the Q&A, and I'm sure probably a question some of you guys might have. PR agencies, Don.
Yeah.
What point do these people need a PR agency? What does a PR agency actually help them do?
What do we do?
Or,
Well,
you
since
know,
there's
and don't piss off
100%
anyone out in the internet. Our
No,
friends.
well, since there's 100% dissatisfaction index.
There was one guy in the back.
I mean, part of it is, I'm curious. I think I'll share a secret. And that's just as almost anybody who engages a PR agency may feel that they got less than their money's worth. I would say that there probably are very, very few publicists who feel like they've ever given everything that could have been gotten. I mean, it's one of those jobs that's kind of like, you know, the Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill. No matter how hard you push, no matter how many great things you can generate, there's always going to be that thing you miss or that thing you didn't have. And it's a constant business of kind of, you know, well, we could have or we should have or all of that. And it's just a sure recipe for, you know, sort of disaster or at least disappointment. So how to become satisfied with a PR agency. All right. I think, you know, sort of rule number one is that no matter how well you think you know your product or your business, it's really helpful to have some outside counsel to help you frame that message and you know, frame the description. How are you going to describe what it is that you do in a way that may not be the way you pitch it to get somebody to invest in you, but actually, you know, because the pitch that you make to an investor is largely about, you know, what's the return going to be? Why is this a great product? But the reason they're going to get a return is that you've been able to excite customers. So, you know, and sometimes if you're really good at running the business and pitching the business, from the business side of it, that may not be the same message that you really need to excite a customer. And I think that a PR firm can be very, very helpful in getting you to frame that.
Well,
And
I
what's the
think too,
golden
like-
rule on your message? You
Oh,
teach them
yeah,
training?
this is something, you know, everybody's kind of heard it. If you don't want to see it in print, don't say it, right? The sub-note
with
of that
social
is,
media.
you know, if there, yeah, I mean, if there's no, you know, there's no such thing as off the record. And it's true, even when you think you're off the record. You can have off-the-record conversations, which means that you're not going to get quoted. But it's kind of like, you know, you have inadmissible evidence in a courtroom, and technically it can't be used. But once the jury has heard it, you know, it's sort of out there. It's like, you
I
know,
would think all these people want to get quoted and get their product out there.
well, yeah. So, you know, what you really
So
want
you
to do
have
is
to do what for the
you want to
press?
make sure that you go into every interview, and this again is where, you know, where a PR agency can be helpful is in kind of mapping out your strategy, in helping you with your messaging, your talking points. You know, what are you can't. Yes, all of our products have 1,000 features that are a benefit to somebody, but 1,000 people is like trying to eat everything on a Las Vegas buffet, right? You know, there's a lot there, but you just can't digest it all. And if you do, you know, it's not going to, you know, be, you know, make a lot of sense.
I will add that if you want to learn media training by watching, on All Things D, Walt Mossberger, they have their All Things D videos. And there's some old Steve Jobs interviews up there. And Steve was the master at media training. No matter what question Walt would ask or Kara, he would always come back to, we're working hard, we're making exciting products. And you can watch these. That's exactly the thing he
That was
always
actually
said.
one of the if you ever really do, thank you for bringing up All Things D, because which brings to mind on conferences, they also have their, you know, on media, and they have their mobile, they have,
Right.
you know, a lot of
Those are
subset
very
things.
expensive though, but
They're very expensive.
But in terms of media
But-
training and how to answer
I
a question.
I mean, one of the main reasons why I went that first year, and, you know, as long as I could afford it or somebody was paying for it, I continued to go, was what interested me in that room from a PR side was watching those live interviews, because unlike a lot of panels, unlike a lot of, you know, sort of speeches or, you know, video interviews, what you're actually seeing there is a sort of live, unedited interaction between a legit journalist and a real CEO, and how they, you know, it's a little bit like going to, you know, a boxing match, you know, they're sparring with
It'd
one
be
another.
really good so you can get some early training and just watch. And you can see the CEOs who can do it well, who can stay on message, and you can see the CEOs who don't do it so well and kind of all over the place and squirming in their chair. So we will now open it up to the last few minutes to open the questions, and please speak loudly, and panelists, you can repeat the question because I want to make sure it gets picked up on the microphone and things like that. So we'll start there.
Yeah, I've got a question. There's so much fragmentation now, obviously, for attention. What are some of the new platforms that are coming up, aside from the obvious ones like Facebook and Twitter, that you see that might actually have real traction, that a startup, you know, put investment into those platforms and maybe see a return, like Pinterest and other things like that?
So you're talking more social platforms than
There's so many
traditional
out there.
media things.
I mean, it really depends upon what you want to do because you don't want to like hit every single platform out there, and so it's
And who your audience
and who
is.
your audience is. So everybody says to me that like Tumblr is for teenage kids. It is, but it's also skewing much older. So that's somewhere to look. And one of the things I love about Tumblr, and Tumblr's been around forever, is that it's all CSS based, and I can make it what I want it to be. So that's, to me, as a former web developer, it's fun. So I can really like turn it into a blog, but make it like trick it out to help my product even more. Instagram has been around for a couple of years now, 2-3 years now. Facebook's bought it, and it's really growing. I think it has a long way to go. I'm really critical of Instagram if you look at my Twitter account, because it has a long way to grow for brands. And if I were a startup, I would look at not only how users are using my platform, but look at how brands can use my platform. Because honestly, I admin over 500 Facebook pages, and if you build something that I have to log in and log out of for 20 accounts a day, it's not helpful to me as a brand. And the brand is the one that, besides your investors, the brand's the one that's going to bring you money. We're going to bring you ad dollars. We're going to, buy, verified accounts. We're going to buy something from you. So that's kind of what you need to look at when you're building a product, is how brands are going to use it as well, because that's something that really frustrates me. But look at things like the Instagrams or the Tumblrs, or there's the and I can't pronounce it. It's the PHEED. It's Feed, I think is how you say it, which is aggregating everything together. So it's posting to your Facebook, it's posting to your Twitter, but it's also a video platform within itself, and it's all mobile. And really, to me, mobile is the way of the future, because nobody's carrying around a laptop, nobody's carrying around, they're carrying around their iPad, they're carrying around their iPhone or their Android phones, and that's how they're connecting to the internet. So, as much as I like to say mobile first, that also hurts brands, because Sony doesn't pay for my iPhone. So I've got to do a lot of this stuff on my personal data plan. So there's a double-edged sword for me there, but really mobile is the future.
Mobile is, and I think video is also,
Well, video is hard because you have things like Vine, which is interesting, but it's 6 seconds of video, and I have to plan out what I'm going to be doing on this thing, and I can't get approvals on it.
Yeah.
I can't do very much with it, and tons of people have signed up for it, but very few people are actually using the platform. But you do have people who want to be like video celebrities. They want to be in front of the camera, the YouTube celebrities of the world. I mean, Justin Bieber launched on YouTube, and there's so many other fabulous YouTube people out there. People are cutting the cord right and left just so that they can, be on YouTube or be on Hulu or whatever, or, some other, like there's a lot of networks now that are doing, web series. I mean, it's kind of funny because back in the day we did web series back when people didn't have broadband, and we were trying, and we were ahead of the game. And it's interesting to me that we've kind of, the ideas we had back in the 90s have now come full circle, to when actually broadband can actually support these things.
I will say, in paid media, we see the same thing. Every single campaign I've done, whether it's targeted to teen girls or it's targeted to adults 35 plus, mobile always outperforms and gets a better cost to return on investment ratio than anything you do online.
Absolutely. I don't even way in the back there. Go.
You guys have talked a lot about speaking in the voice of the brand and speaking in the voice of an more so games is what's relevant to me. When is it appropriate to speak in the voice of a character? And do y'all have like best practice recommendations for speaking in the voice of a character?
We tend to not speak in the voice of the character, unless it is a character account. So if it is in a TV show or a movie, it's like, open season, if it's Boog or somebody, that's their character. The reason we don't tend to speak in the voice of the character is because we want that broader audience. So, we wanna reach everybody, not just somebody that's gonna be invested in that character. So if I'm doing like the Smurfs, I'm not gonna speak as a Smurf, I'm gonna speak as, the brand of the Smurfs.
There's also some rules in Facebook, and I think they tweaked it recently. You can't have fictional
Yeah,
characters.
they have to be brand pages,
They have to be a brand page, and then, I was gonna say, the one Twitter character that really worked was Ted. And they did a whole Twitter campaign with Ted saying crazy, I don't wanna swear,
Yeah.
but crazy stuff, that I don't know how the MPA ever approved, but.
I don't think they did.
Well, I don't think they did, and
But it worked.
The way I've always looked at things is, to a certain extent, rules are made to be broken, especially if you don't want to hurt people. But I think the TED case was actually a really good example because they took the character, the writers, so that the tweets were exactly in keeping with the character so that they were real. As far as a game is concerned, I know there are some brands, for instance, Monster is branching out, and we think a Monster is selling cables and headphones, but they actually have a whole group of characters now representing different segments, and they're so they have a game character, kind of a rather, muscular, kind of superhero guy. And he is a real person, but he's actually sort of impersonating or characterizing a character, and they're using that. So I would say, to the extent that you can be really, you do have to be authentic. It's got to be really true to the character. But I think these all become kind of extensions of the brand. It's less about marketing, although, it's all kind of
It's marketing,
fuzzy
but it's
now.
not
It's
marketing.
marketing because it's continuing engagement.
I'm just realizing that one person I did leave off this panel is probably creative, and I probably definitely should have had creative, because all this stuff really doesn't work unless you have the strong creative behind it. Paul, sir, 2 more questions? Yeah, okay. 2 more questions, there we go.
Question for Ann. I know you mentioned that you guys use paid media to generate awareness on content for your content. Do you pay for content distribution? My guess is you guys probably don't, given that you have tens of millions of distribution outlets and eyeballs and 500 Facebook accounts. How would you recommend that folks who don't have the wealth of those outlets and eyeballs, how would you recommend that kind of the smaller folks distribute content, get it seen?
I don't have very much experience in that at all, unfortunately, just because I've been in the studio, for 14 years I've been at Sony, so I don't honestly, but I have people that I can put you in touch with that do actually have that really good experience in that.
Do you have some examples of any paid distribution, or, I know there are things you can buy a sponsored tweet.
Yeah,
I
I don't know how
and
that actually
I
works.
would not recommend that, yeah.
I
will tell you, in fact, one of the most interesting things that I've seen is, and it was just spontaneous on Faster, which was a Dwayne Johnson movie. This almost goes back to the character thing, because Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, is almost a character in itself. But
He's the most popular person on Facebook.
Vin Diesel just spontaneously, we didn't pay for it, he just spontaneously tweeted that, can't wait to see this movie, this scene looks awesome, and it was genuine, it was authentic, and he is that character itself.
If you look at his Facebook account, he's awesome about promoting his products.
And sometimes you can't tell the difference, the social stuff, what's paid and what's not. There was another movie, End of Watch, which was it was projected to open 4th on that weekend. It was like Trouble with the Curve, a big Spending Warner Brothers movie and House at the End of the Street and another one. And End of Watch was supposed to be number 4. On Friday of opening weekend, all of a sudden, there were like 7 or 8 relatable celebrities that were sort of in that field, if you will, that started tweeting about that movie. Well, I can tell you, that doesn't happen spontaneously, that it all happens on the same day and within the course of a few hours of the movie opening. So I know that was orchestrated, but it worked. That movie opened to number 1, and that was the only thing that really could account for that kind of change.
But beyond Twitter, Facebook, so if you have video distribution, YouTube, you can buy True Views.
You can buy,
You want to
yeah.
explain quickly what True Views is for?
I mean, it's paid media, and again, I think I want to remember. Oh boy, we got it like. I want to say it was like sometimes it came in at like a 2-cent cost per thousand, two pennies. I mean, really, in terms of getting video out there, TrueViews always it had limits in terms of how far you could take it, but it was always the most cost efficient way that we could get video out there.
And then there's other things on YouTube, whether you partner with some of these YouTube celebrities. Again, who's your audience? What's your content? And a lot of these guys, whether they're through Maker or whatever, you can partner with them.
Does everybody know what they're talking about when she says True Views? No?
That- Yeah, that's basically on YouTube when it's an ad that can run before, that takes you then to your piece of content. You can also have your content sponsored on the page based on search, just think of Google search kind of things. And you're paying, as you're saying, it's based on performance and Google bidding things. All right, is there one last question? One last question, wait, you already asked a question. Anyone else that haven't asked a question? Go for it.
This question's for Ann. How do you measure success from your social media campaigns as far as when it comes to the theatrical release or the?
Yeah, I mean,
How do you measure the ROI?
a lot of success to me, again, is the number of people that are engaging with my content. You know, I look at the retweets, you know, every time we post, I'll look at the last post, you know, did it perform? Did people engage with it in any way? Did they retweet it? Did they share it? Did they, you know, they comment it? Did they like it? You know, did they heart it? Did they reblog it? If nobody's doing that, then I'm changing my content up on the fly to make sure that that's working, you know, and we found that the more people that are engaging with our content, and I can't look at the box office and say, this is why this movie did well, you know, because I've got this many people on my page, or this many, you know, people have like engaged with my content, because I don't, you know, I'm not the box office, so I can't tell. Like, we have a ticketing widget on our page, that people can look up ticket buys and that. By the time you go to the Fandango or the whatever off of ours, I've lost you. So I don't know, I know that you've engaged with my content, but I don't know that you've actually bought tickets. I'm just hoping that my content is, you know, engaging enough or interesting enough that you've fallen in love with it and you've actually bought tickets to my property. You know, one of the things that I would like, this is my Facebook wish. My Facebook wish is that on the main page when you log into Facebook, on the right rail, which is potentially going away with the new redesign, it would say, you know, to remind you that you've liked a movie property, or that, you know, a TV show that you're watching is on tonight. You know, just like they have events on, that you've signed up for an event, it would tell you that, you know, you've liked this page. Well, this event is actually happening this weekend, or this event is actually happening today, but it's content you've engaged with, because especially with a movie, you're liking something that you've never seen before. You know, home entertainment, I've got you, potentially you've seen this property, or somebody's told you about this movie and you're really engaged with it. But, you know, with a movie, you're getting something you've never seen. So I'm
It'd be a
kind
nice
of
product
tricking
for
you
anyone.
into something.
It'd be a nice product for anyone, because like,
Yeah.
they have a new release or 2.0 or whatever, they already like their page.
Yeah.
The ability to push back and from.
Yeah, so that's my Facebook.
I'm
wish.
going to wrap it up. You guys have been a fantastic panel. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.